This thing was dialed.
Yeah,
This thing was great.
From the start. There was no shot from the start. What he had walked into was not a debate. This was an ambush. These weren't moderators. They were essentially campaign aides. They took it upon themselves to make sure that when she answers something stupid like, I will work harder, they just move on. This was a setup.
A setup from the beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Welcome to a very special post-debate analysis here on the Ruthless Variety program. I'm Josh Holmes, along with Comfortably Smug John Ashbrook. Unfortunately, Michael Duncan out on assignment, but we felt like we needed to get you to all of this as quickly as possible. You're hearing a lot of debate analysis. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you probably saw the debate or at least pieces of it. There's a lot of stuff going on out there about analyzing the way it went. We got a little different role here at Ruthless in that we're going to show you and talk you through just how horrible ABC was at all of this. I mean, fellas, breathtaking.
It was beyond just like shocking at how bad it was, or even beyond like how disgusting, absurd it was, and spineless and openly like left-wing hackery it was. I love that we're going to go step by step and fillet these people and hold them accountable.
We're going to show you and walk you through the transcript of just how bad it is. Because, look, oftentimes is the case when you're not doing very well in a debate, you blame the moderator, right? Because you can't defend your own performance. You blame the moderator. That's not what's happening here. When you hear what it is that we're going to go through, there may never have been a presidential debate just as poorly moderated as the one that you saw on Tuesday night.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit of taste of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to go through all of it. But these moderators took center stage in a way that I don't think any moderator ever has before. We counted up at Ruthless the number of words that Lindsay Davis and David Muir had in the debate last night. It was around 3,000 words. Multiple questions they asked, over 100 words. And let's compare that to a real professional, Bernard Shaw from CNN.
Yeah.
Remember, Governor Dukakis, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you seek an irrevocable death penalty for her assailant? It's like 17, 18 words.
Yeah.
That's a very tough question. That is a race-shaping question. It doesn't take 100 words of throat clearing.
No, I mean, these guys just didn't get it. They didn't get it from the very beginning, but they definitely had an agenda. It turns out it helps if you have some relationships, right?
They have very deep relationships. And, of course, we're talking about Kamala Harris is extremely close to a top executive at Disney who is in charge of ABC News. There was a New York Times story written about this relationship in August of this year. And the New York Times asked ABC to respond. And ABC is, of course, like, no, well, she doesn't have any authority over the editorial decision-making. And parenthetically, the New York Times added, she may not have authority over editorial decision-making. What she does have authority over is paychecks and budgeting.
Yeah. She doesn't care at all what you have to say. She'll also be signing the paychecks.
Exactly.
Amazing.
She'll let you know how you did in 2 weeks' time.
So this thing was sort of doomed from the beginning. And look, in all honesty, like Donald Trump's had stronger debates. He, in June, against Joe Biden, executed a game plan of not taking the bait on anything. And he just body bagged Joe Biden to the point where he basically had to resign. It was so bad. What you saw from him was a much more combative Donald Trump, where he let absolutely no accusation stand. He rebutted everything, even when it's on his liability side of the ledger. Again, that does play a role, right? I mean, we talked about this in our pre-debate special on Tuesday, hoping he would stay away from that and keep pushing her on defense. That didn't happen. But it's easy to see why that didn't happen when we go through all of this.
Yep.
First thing we want to do, though, is just get to some clips, some highlights. Trump had a number of moments that you're not going to hear about because of all the rest of this mess that accompanied the debate analysis. But here's one that I thought was pretty good. Clip 1, if you don't mind, Spaghettis.
I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan. And it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was what we were hoping for, right? There was a story that came out about initially she had no issues tab on her website when she was running for president. She got goaded into making an issues tab. The problem was the source code for all of that was the Biden issue code stuff.
It's like they copy my homework but change it up a little bit, and they didn't change it up a little bit.
They didn't change it up a little
pasted
bit.
the whole damn thing.
No, it's just verbatim. And so that's what he was talking about there. And that actually it has a deeper cut than that because we all know this is true. Like she's just making up stuff, but she doesn't have a platform. This is all, like you said, vibes and magic.
And a perfect example is like her follow-up to him calling her out like that. She was like, well, Goldman Sachs likes my plan.
Yeah.
Did she just say that? Did she just say, I'm using the Goldman Sachs plan?
Yeah.
A lot of hardworking Americans that might not like that.
The Goldman Sachs plan.
The Goldman Sachs plan.
So here's clip 2, another one of the interjections that they were having back and forth.
And everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
What he's referencing there is what she did to Joe Biden, essentially. And their big 2019 debates where she was trying to be, forceful and whatnot, and it stand out from the crowd. And that was what was widely anticipated to be her stance here. One of the reasons why they were so upset about muting the microphones is that she wanted to do that. Well, he got her with it first.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible because I think so many people knew that, oh my God, Kamala Harris is going to need to do some stunt. She's going to go to the class. She's going to be like, I'm talking now. I'm speaking,
Yeah.
And for him to just instantly reverse it is just terrific.
It really is. Here's clip 3 where Trump is invoking the other guy that was running against him this cycle, which I thought was fantastic. Clip 3, please, Spaghettis.
Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach.
And that is critical because that's the only image Americans have seen of the U.S. president for the past 2 months. Is him just passed out on the beach. That's all they've seen him.
Well, and there was she was doing her very best to try to get out from underneath incumbency here.
Yes, 100%.
So that brought it back in and recontextualized for people. No, she is the Biden administration. And by the way, we haven't seen the dude that she works for in months. I thought that was good.
And you know what was wild, and I know we're going to get into it, but she did not distance herself from Biden in this debate. No. I sort of expected her to find one thing that she disagreed with that the administration did. Not a single thing. In fact, she was quoting him, praising him. She was very opposite of what I expected.
Really, really good point. Here's some Kamala lowlights. Clip 4, if you don't mind, Spaghettis.
4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century.
What do we think about that, Wolf? As a
Yeah, that's just a straight up lie.
it just so happens everybody's sitting at Fort Bragg these days. Is that the way? Is that what's going? Is that our understanding? Not a single member of the military in a war zone.
Getting all fat and sassy.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. Well, she is vice president, so what would she know about troop deployments, right?
And that's the thing is being pointed out by a number of veterans is the fact that only a few weeks ago we had American service members who were injured serving in a theater of combat overseas. Like, she fails to acknowledge this, and it goes right back to the heart of the problem of why her and Biden concocted this horrible clause, because they just wanted this like moment of like, oh, it's the September 11th anniversary. The whole like press conference we give is more important than we put, Americans' lives in danger, at risk, in combat. And she refuses to acknowledge them yet again.
I mean, we got half the damn Navy sitting in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, what the hell is she talking about?
Yeah.
Right.
She forgot about the bridge they tried building over there and sunk, like the whole thing that she was allowed to get away with is incredible.
It's like they're just sitting over there playing cards.
Yep.
For crying out loud, these guys, if something goes wrong, you know damn well what's going to be in their face every day, and she just blows right past it.
Yeah.
No
well, and
respect.
their foreign policy gives them reason for concern that they could be in the middle of something very quickly because they have absolutely no sensible foreign policy whatsoever.
Like the dock she built right off of
Yeah.
The sinking dock. Turns out it wasn't meant to be a dock. Stupid shit. This is the fracking thing we've been talking so much about. Clip 5, please, Spaghetti.
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020.
Nonsense.
I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened...
I don't even know where to begin with this.
Yes.
I don't even know where to begin with this. First of all, she was running for president in 2020. And that's when she said, I will absolutely ban fracking, period. Like, what that she made clear?
She made clear that she would ban fracking when she said it straight up at one of the Democrat debates. And again, for the moderators not to be like, wait a minute, I think the whole reason she just straight up lied and hoped that she could get away with is because she sees what a vulnerability this is in Pennsylvania. It's hurting her in Pennsylvania, and she is trying to run from her past. And furthermore, what I think is critical is we don't need to conjecture what would happen if Kamala were in power, because she's a current incumbent. She's been in power, and the first thing they did day one is banned all fracking on publicly owned land. They banned it.
Yeah.
So we've seen they've already taken the step in that direction. She can try lying, but the facts show she wants to ban fracking.
And there were multiple times in this debate when these moderators tried to fact check Donald Trump. They didn't do anything
Not a
on
single
Kamala
time.
Harris in that moment. There are plenty of other moments we're going to get to, but like it would have been very easy for them to say, no, here's your quote.
Yeah.
They didn't do it.
They didn't do it. Here's another one. Clip 6, Spaghetti.
I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking, and then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away, so stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
Oh, I seem to remember Kamala Harris saying something about taking people's guns away. I think she called it something called a mandatory buyback. Who was she talking to about
That's
that?
right. She was talking to David Muir in 2020.
You mean the very
You're
handsome
kidding.
devil that's sitting behind that desk asking the questions?
Yeah, she says directly to David Muir that I am 100% supportive and I would have mandatory gun buybacks. She says it to David Muir in 2020. This time, he's just like, oh, well, I didn't hear anything.
Are there two David Muirs, or is that just the same?
Yeah, there's one who's trying to get Kamala elected, the current one, and the one who's actually trying to be a moderator.
Well, he was a Democratic primary moderator at
Yeah,
that point. He
'cause
also had skin in the game for Joe Biden.
100%.
Yeah, no, it just,
Maybe that just slipped his mind last night.
Yeah.
Maybe he just forgot to
He just
fact
forgot
check
to
her on
fact
that.
check.
Yeah, no, but she owns a gun, so, her policies be damned. So anyway, look, we're going to get to an awful lot of this in more detail. But we always ask you a question right off the top that we'd like your responses to on YouTube. Remember, you got to like and subscribe in order to do this, and we read every single one of them. Mm-hmm. We're going to get to all of them, but our question is, will any of this matter? Will this debate matter? Does it matter even a little bit? I think that there is, let me give you my personal view. My personal view is there is not one single person that was committed to vote for Donald Trump who was affected the least bit by what happened on Tuesday night. Where I'm disappointed is that I think, based on the trajectory of this race and the sugar high that they had come down from, and just the trajectory of public opinion as it related to Kamala Harris and her job approval and everything else, that Tuesday night was an opportunity to end this thing.
Yeah.
If that would have gone decisively Donald Trump's way, I think we could have reopened the gap that we were looking at with Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. And we could once again be talking about not only a win, but perhaps a substantial electoral college victory. I don't think that's going to happen today because of the way that debate played out. And there's a lot of people in the states that matter, the 6 or 7 that we talk about all the time on this program, where those, hard to believe they exist, but there's still some undecided voters out there. They go from one camp to another depending on what's going on environmentally. They're largely economic. They're largely in a kind of a mid to higher income range. They pay attention to tone and substance and stuff like that. And she has none of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for a reason.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. They were just begging for a reason. They have reservations and have had reservations about Donald Trump. They've not been counted for since 2016 in the Republican camp. But they were open for business here. I think they're still open for business, but I don't think we did a lot of... That's my just 50,000-foot take on the debate writ large.
Yeah, he had some other moments last night. I don't think we have this clip in the hopper, but there was a moment where he pressed her. He's like, why are you standing here talking to me? Why don't you go back and drag Biden's ass out of bed and sign a document that closes the border? Because you can do that right now.
Right.
Remember, the first thing they did when they were sworn into office was open the border.
Yep.
That they all this fanfare, this huge document of a presidential decree that the border is open. You know that they could undo that and close the border. She didn't have an answer for that last night. And one of the reasons why I'm kind of hoping for a second debate is because it gives him the opportunity to say, it's been 3 weeks since I asked you to close the border. You are still in charge and you haven't done shit.
And I think also, when in the immediate aftermath, you had Kamala's camp calling for another debate. I think one of the things, and you're not going to get this discussion anywhere else, is the fact of the matter is Kamala did not accomplish what she needed to, which is separation from Joe Biden, right? And to let people know what the hell she actually believes in.
Right.
Because
this is a great point.
She was allowed to dance around all night, not answer any questions. No one knows where she stands. She had a policy page that went up 10 minutes before the debate. That was a copy and paste job from Joe Biden. No one knows. Like, these swing voters don't know what she believes. They don't know what she's thinking. And they still consider her to be a part of Biden because she's a part of the Biden
Because she is.
That's why.
Because people aren't idiots. As much as Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, the rest of the Democratic establishment treat them as such.
Yep.
I think there has never been a more one-sided debate than the one we saw in July or end of June. And so this debate next to that one was always going to be something different than what President Trump did, ending the 45-year career of Joe Biden.
Yeah.
That was always going to be different. There are more shots that he can land, and that's why I hope he can have another debate so that he can land those shots.
Yeah. Look, I think it's well said. We want to get to ABC.
This is going to be good.
We want to get to ABC because, again, everybody whines about this shit. We're going to show you. Right? We've done this for a living. We've negotiated debates. We've prepped for debates. We've done all of these things. And so you look for certain parameters in order to tell whether or not you're getting a real slant job or you're not. On its surface, you look at what they brought up, right? I've just sort of categorized the issues that they brought up. By my calculation, they brought up 7 liabilities as questions to Donald Trump 4 for Kamala Harris, and then they had 3 foreign policy questions. They brought up tariffs in the context of not like justifying or talking about it, but whether or not people can pay higher prices.
It was nearly a 150-word question from David Muir.
Yeah, just amazing, right? Tariffs, abortion, Jan 6, election denial, race, failure to repeal Obamacare, and climate change. All right? The 4 that Kamala got, and I'm counting this liberally, the economy, right? Which everybody should be able to answer.
Right.
But they did it in the context of like, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? So I counted it as a liability. I'm generous. Immigration, and one of them was a directive towards Trump. So like at least one of them was a liability, the other one, And then her flip-flops. That's it, right? Just like moving on through that. And then they have the foreign policy section, Israel, Ukraine, Afghanistan, which, those are complicated subjects, and I don't know if they're all liabilities for this administration, but they weren't set as such, right?
It's quite the tally.
So the beginning of the debate, you look at this, and you would say the first 3 minutes, I was sort of excited about. What did you guys think? Like the first 3 minutes as it was starting, I was like, okay, this feels all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that Kamala's liabilities are Kamala's liabilities. She's not relatable. She's kind of stiff and awkward, and she was very nervous.
Yeah.
Initially, and
you could tell.
You could tell.
I mean, she basically read a transcript answer that somebody had typed for her first economic question.
Absolutely.
But I agree with you on the first 3 minutes. You watch a basketball game and you're like, are the refs letting these guys play? Are they letting them bang down low a little bit? Are they going to let the fouls kind of go?
Are the refs going to be the storyline, or is it going to be the players on the court?
In the first 3 minutes.
First 3 minutes, it was the players on the court. Now, also, what I had noticed is the questions in and of themselves, okay. Like question out, like way too verbose. But the framing of the question, I'll give you a good example. The first question off the bat is, when it comes to the economy, he's talking to Kamala Harris. Do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
Fair
The
question.
answer to that obviously is no.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously everyone says no to that. I mean, it's like 70% of the American public say it's no. You have to be an idiot to think that this economy is better than the one that Donald Trump had, and polls reflect that. So this is a real liability. She goes on to not answer a single piece of this.
It's incredible.
Not a single piece. She also just taught my passion. This is the best quote. This might be my very favorite quote of the entire debate. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. What the?
She has never once, for one day in her life, worked in the private sector, but it's one of her passions.
And that's why I consistently vote to raise taxes on small businesses. No, I mean, like, I've never heard this before. My passion? My passion. Like, I don't know. Maybe she's a passionate person. Maybe she has real passion. Small businesses are not one of them.
It's
I can assure her of that.
One of my passions is fishing. Have you ever been fishing? No. Okay.
It reminded me, and I think this is something Michael might say had he been here with us. There's an internet meme about my passion is graphic design. Have you seen this?
And it's the worst mess you've ever seen.
That's exactly what she was doing. But it was ripe for a follow-up.
Yeah.
I understand
Well,
I understand you say your passion is small business. Why are so many struggling under your regime?
Yeah, but she also didn't answer the question. The question was, are we better off than we were 4 years ago? Very direct question. She provided zero justification for that whatsoever. And they switched to Trump for a rebuttal. And I was like, well, they're letting them play here. Like, that's the best you can hope for as a Republican, is the moderator sits it out. And, you just kind of let them go. He actually spurs on a little bit more of the economic debate, which works for Donald Trump. People trust him on it. Yeah. So the whole first 3 minutes, you're looking at this stuff and you're like, okay. He's like, you're responding. He's basically just facilitating a conversation that, frankly, the American people needed to hear. Because she's not doing anything here except for word salads.
Yeah.
And making up stuff. Goldman Sachs, you mentioned.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs loves the
Yeah, Goldman Sachs loves her stuff.
Extremely popular Goldman Sachs after 2008.
And then she injects the idea, she calls it a national sales tax, that Donald Trump has a national sales tax. Which, for those of us who do this for a living or pay even vague attention, you know damn well that there's never been a national sales tax that has come out from Donald Trump or anyone remotely connected to Donald Trump. What she's referring to is his tariff plan and Donald Trump's economic view that we've been given a free ride to China and a lot of other countries by allowing cheap goods to get shipped into the United States, and he's going to change all that. And so during his administration, he did. They put tariffs on Chinese goods and things like that, and the markets kind of reacted to it. But it didn't change prices, right? I mean, there's a good economic argument that if you tariff low-cost goods, that maybe those goods get more expensive. Sometimes the markets react as they did in the 4 years he was president. But there's an economic argument, realistically. But here's the question that David Muir puts to Donald Trump after she raises this. Mm-hmm. It's not... They didn't raise it. She raised it. They come back saying, do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs? It grants the premise of the question without any economic data to actually support it, because if you looked at where prices were during the Trump administration, you had record low inflation.
This is critical, and it's insidious. What David Muir has done here is after they've allowed her to skate with not answering anything about the economy, which we all know is a result. The reason Americans don't feel good about this economy is because of inflation as a result of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's policy. We all know this. David Muir saying, oh, these high prices are because of Donald Trump's tariffs.
Well, I mean, it's just accepted in the question. Now he has to defensively answer that there's a price thing. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, he could probably just said, well, the prices didn't go up. But he tries to explain it. You know, he tries to explain it. Yeah, and one of the ways that he tries to explain it is, if these things were so bad for prices, why did you keep a whole lot of them that I actually put in?
Right.
Which, again, so far, like, they pick this up and they say, do you want to respond to that, Kamala Harris? Which I think, you know, makes a lot of sense, except she doesn't answer again.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Doesn't touch it in all. She starts talking about COVID in China. And she's talking about his relation, Donald Trump, of all people, his cozy relationship with China. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm like, what? Do I miss the economy and tariff thing? Like, what? We're talking about COVID. He's talking about, she literally switches it to COVID. And so, all right, so where do we go from there? Muir, again, just kind of lets them go. Yeah. Lets them talk about this for a while. And then we get to the star of the show, Lindsay Davis. I don't know Lindsay Davis. It's typically sort of weird. David Muir, I actually worked with in 2006 was the last time I interacted with him, where he was a guy with campaign beat, so I knew he did some politics. Never met Lindsay Davis. Apparently she knows something enough to get on a debate stage, at least for ABC. And what does she turn to? The issue of abortion. We talked enough about the economy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about...
Americans don't want to hear about it.
Let's talk about something that's already been litigated in 50 states, right? Obviously, this is what the Harris campaign wants to build the entirety of their campaign around and try to put Trump on the defensive. This is about a 400-word question.
Yeah, it's a soliloquy followed by a question mark. It's not a question. This is her statement as if she's a candidate.
This is how she summarizes it. And this is the last two sentences. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Should they trust you?
Can you believe that?
No, you're taking the opponent, the person who's on stage, you're taking their charge, and they're saying, respond to it, right? Usually you get that in the context of a debate. I was sort of told that's what debates were for. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't need a moderator to have somebody level an execution who's standing right next to you, but, you know, that's what they do. So Trump does the abortion thing, and he goes on to explain all of these things, and they ask for, at some point, where Kamala Harris is on this, right? He raises, in response to a lot of this, the Democrats are radical on it, and that they have in many states rejected protections for babies being aborted in the ninth month. Mm-hmm. Some cases post-birth. Yeah. Rejected those projections. Like, they just threw them out. That is true. That is true. They have done that. So she says, Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump, but not before. She says there's no state in the country where it's legal to kill a baby after it's born. Here's where she's wrong. there were protections in place for failed abortions, abortions that were intended to eliminate a baby, that the baby survived and they were given a live birth. And there were protections at some point in place to say that you can't eliminate a child, even if it was intended to be aborted. Democrats did do away with that.
And Tim Walz voted against letting a child survive or helping a child survive, a baby in that instance.
So, again, this is the first time in this debate that Donald Trump has made a representation that, for the first time, ABC moderators have now stepped in to state authoritatively to an audience of 30 million people that he's wrong about that. And it's just matter of fact now, Vice President, what do you have to say about that?
And they did it the last time when Ralph Northam was on video saying that, like, oh, yeah, this is totally cool. Like, Trump references it, and the moderators ignored that. They say, oh, that's fake. Didn't happen. Unbelievable.
So then they just kick it to her and just say, what's your response to him on this issue? And so she's got a very prepared.
Oh, yeah.
Again, this is her campaign stump speech that she basically delivers. And she delivers it in part by suggesting, actually not suggesting, stating outright that he would sign a national abortion ban, something that Donald Trump has very specifically spoken to and said that he would not do, and that he feels more comfortable with it being litigated at the states the way it is now. He said that repeatedly. He said that, like, you'd have to be deaf not to hear that. Right?
Another lie that was not fact-checked by ABC.
So
they could have very easily said, President Trump has said he opposes that. Would you like to expand President Trump?
Very easily could have. It's the voice of God thing. It provides some credibility to a response, as they did to her in the previous question. They didn't do that. They had to, she tried to interrupt, said, thank you, Vice President Harris, and tried to move on. And Trump rightly interjected and said, that's nonsense. I've never said that.
Right. They would have saved themselves a lot of criticism if they would have evened it up.
So she wants to talk about a national abortion ban and get Donald Trump wrapped around the axle on it when he said he's not going to do it. Lindsey Davis then picks up after his rebuttal saying, I'm not going to do it, saying, would you veto a national abortion ban? So now you've got a moderator that is not just fact-checking one of the candidates, not just asking a question with the entire presupposition being the charge that one of the candidates on stage is doing against another. You now have the argument that was being made taken by one of those candidates and used in another separate question.
That's the thing, is she has taken Kamala Harris's lie and now she's fighting Trump with it. This to me is the moment where Kamala Harris is essentially the moderator. Now Lindsey Davis is like, tap me in, coach, I'm going in.
That's right.
Now he's debating Lindsey Davis.
This is shit you don't see. So everything up to this point, it's been like, okay, it's a little loose. It's starting to come off the wheel. Like, maybe they shouldn't have interjected with that point. Now we're into the meat of, like, you've got an active, hostile moderating core that is seeking for an outcome here.
Yep.
And you can see it. The whole tone of this entire debate changes. So he explains to Lindsey Davis, rightly, that there's nobody in the world who could pass a national abortion ban. First of all, it would need 60 votes in the United States Senate. They have, on the best day ever, 46. No matter what the regardless. I mean, they're not even close to being able to pass something like that. And then she interjects again on the same issue that Kamala Harris raised, saying, but if I could just get a yes or no. Okay, well, Trump goes on to again explain to her that that's never getting to his desk, nor is what she wants to do, because that's not able to get 60 votes either. So this is like not an issue that anybody needs to talk about in the context of a presidential veto, which was the question directly answered by him. Vice President Harris, I want to give you time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion? Okay, I was like, all right, well, maybe we're not totally off the rails because he raised this. They don't have restrictions. You know, like maybe this is an opening. She picked it up. She goes on to not answer a single bit of any of this. Absolutely none. Instead, she pivots to IVF. Again, an issue where there's not a dime's worth of difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. It's something Democrats are running on because of the state of Alabama Supreme Court that had a negative IVF ruling, which immediately you saw national Republicans and Senate Republicans try to pass something protecting IVF. I mean, again, it's an issue without a problem. Everybody's got the same position on it with the exception of a few. And they're trying to put this onto Donald Trump because of the sake of a Democrat national narrative that they're trying to create.
So after Kamala doesn't answer the question and tries to do a switcheroo, does Lindsey Davis give her the yes or no?
Nope.
Oh.
Doesn't touch any
Oh,
of
you're
that.
kidding. You're kidding. Why don't you, maybe on the back of that paper.
Are you sure?
I can't see
Because she
anyone.
just finished doing a couple yes or no's, answer the question.
Yeah, well, they just asked her whether or not she supported any restrictions. Nowhere does she say anything about any restrictions. She mentions IVF, doesn't fact check any of the IVF thing. Instead, Trump again has to interject. Because again, it's a deadly issue if people are misrepresented on IVF. Yep. Millions of families around this country have looked into this process if they can't have children. You can't let that lie. He's got to get in there and do it. So he does. And then at the end of it, he's like, but you still didn't answer the question. Would you have restrictions on the 8th or 9th month? And all she says is, come on. He asks her the question again, and she says, well, why don't you answer the question about the veto? She's made all of this up. This is not the question that the moderator asked was to Kamala Harris on restrictions. Instead, we're talking about the veto, and the moderator, not even the candidate, the moderator is the one that's like, well, the veto sounds better than what I asked.
It's amazing. Kamala's like, can we go back to the moderator debating you for me? It's just completely off the rails at this point.
So anyway, Trump brings this up. She thanks, they put a bow on all of this. And another 300 words comes out of David Muir. And my question is to Vice President Harris, again, a question that I think they came up with in production. They were like, these are fair, even stuff to Harris saying, but my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait 6 months before an election to act on the issue of immigration? And would you do anything differently than President Biden? Well, you'll never guess what comes next. She doesn't touch any of that. Instead, she talks about her role as a prosecutor. She talks about her support for a bipartisan bill in the United States Senate that never saw the light of day, that they have chosen to say but for. Just recall, all of the border security stuff that was so successful during the Trump administration was not done by Congress. Democrats wouldn't vote on it. It was done by the Trump administration. Things like Remain in Mexico, Title 42, all that stuff was done by them, and Biden got rid of all of it.
Yes.
Right? And then they did nothing about it as the border flooded with illegal immigrants until it became a huge election year issue, at which point then they had some executive action, but all the past they blamed on, Congress.
That's the thing is, it would be critical, and it would be a very important moment for a moderator to step in and state that fact that, like my question asked, what would you do differently? Because the executive orders that you and the Biden administration repealed are responsible for this. Would you do anything differently? Kamala's not asked any of it. Not allowed to just dance around.
She didn't directly, would you do anything differently? Didn't do anything. They did have a follow-up, redirect to Donald Trump. You know what it was? Why'd you kill that bill that she's talking about?
I mean, it's
literally, why did you try to kill that bill?
It's insane.
What everybody observed and maybe didn't realize that they were observing was how the mainstream media develops a story.
Yep.
And the story is always aligned with a left-wing narrative that is informed by what Democrats think that they can get done. So it's always about supporting Democrats. It's always about changing the subject to something that advances a liberal agenda. And what you heard there was moving the ball, changing the conversation from what she could do today to what some bill in Congress that didn't even see the light of day.
It didn't pass the Senate. It never would have passed the House. It's a hypothetical. This is nothing that all of a sudden now he's responsible for the border crisis.
And again, this is also another thing that the moderators kept trying to accomplish last night, is they're like, Donald Trump, why didn't you pass this bill? Because he wasn't president. Guess who was right there?
Right.
Guess who voted in the Senate? The person standing next to him. Maybe you asked, you're telling me that the vice president who's currently running for president can't get anything done because Trump can overrule her? Like, what kind of bizarre thing is this? The moderators acted very much in the purpose of making Donald Trump the incumbent.
Right.
Because Kamala Harris being tied to her work that she's accomplished over these past 4 years
And let's be very clear.
is a liability.
It's the moderators doing the work. She's not.
She did not make the case.
She's giving gobbledygook,
Yep.
nonsensical answers that don't answer a question time and time again. It's the moderators that are taking pieces of what she's done and redirecting it in that way to try to frame up what we're talking about. That's why it's so insidious. That's why this is so crazy. They're not close to done here. He's starting to get obviously agitated by the fact that he's in a 3-on-1 debate.
Now it's become completely everyone versus Trump.
Yeah.
There's no like pretense that this is a debate moderators. This is now everyone get Trump.
Kamala gets that. She starts just throwing grenades in because she's just trying to rattle him at this point. She brings up the rallies and things like that. He takes the bait on that. He starts talking about rallies. In the context of his answer, he starts talking about the town of Springfield and the reports that are out there about how they have Haitian immigrants that have started to eat pets, right? A lot of conjecture back and forth about whether this is true. There is evidence to suggest it absolutely is true. They have a Democratic city manager of Springfield who, if you're the city manager of a town and somebody asks you whether your town people eat the pets, you're probably going to say no to that.
Yeah.
I mean, that ain't great for the Chamber of Commerce of Springfield, let me just say. Like, you don't want to be known as the pet-eating capital of America. That's her job. They obviously say, well, we don't know anything about that. So David Murr suggests he's got to come in on this. I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio. ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. Well, only ABC News can figure that out. You wouldn't want to go on the ground and ask anybody, but we called the city manager, and they said there's no credible reports or specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community. Okay, I don't doubt that that's what they said. He interjects with it totally unnecessarily, but again, we were on the topic, if you recall, of border security, and somehow Kamala Harris gets off without answering a single thing what you would do differently than Joe Biden. We're still on that topic. That was the question.
And that's the thing. When you have Muir going back in like that, he's in the debate. Muir is now debating Trump, and Kamala is just standing back. It's like the moderators are now debating Trump, and Kamala's now become a moderator. She's picking the questions.
And you saw this one go back and forth, right? He says this, and Trump says, well, I've seen people on television saying that their pets are eaten. And he's like, well, we're not talking about television. I'm talking to the city manager. And Trump's like, okay, well, people are saying on TV that their dogs were eaten. So, maybe you're the reporter. Like, go ahead. And he's like, again, the Springfield city manager said there's no evidence of that. Okay, well, who's he debating here?
Yep.
Right.
Is it David Muir? Is that the role of the moderator? To 4 times interject about what's happening in Springfield, Ohio?
And 0 times interject on anything from Kamala Harris.
She still hasn't been asked what she would do differently.
No.
They have not followed up when she's been a member of this administration, and everyone knows it's the executive orders that were removed that Donald Trump put in place that allowed the border to be secure. She's not been asked about any of it.
So the original question, what would you do differently? Why was it within 6 months of the election? Why did you open the border and do all that stuff? The original question, which was a good one, we're still on that topic. They allow her again a chance to respond. You know how they frame it? I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
What do you want to say? I'll give you some time.
Of what you've heard after I've just castigated your opponent.
Yeah.
Right? So she's got like a freewheeling bat to swing away at now again the moderator validating an argument against Donald Trump and then just handing her the bat and being like, have at it, Hoss.
Yep.
I mean, that's what a horribly corrupt debate looks like.
It's horrific.
It's never as bad as putting people in dim lighting and a shorter stool and only asking them about their worst family member, because that would be too obvious. This is how you do it.
This is how you do it.
But it has nothing to do with Kamala's best friend, who the New York Times says signs their paycheck.
No,
nothing
of course
to do,
not.
Nothing to do with that.
No. I just can't even imagine. He wants to continue on the issue of immigration, and he talks a little bit about what Trump has said that he would do to secure the border, but I think at some point he adjusts and decides that might actually help him.
Yeah.
So he says, He wants to also deport 11 million undocumented immigrants. I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does that look like? Will authorities be going door to door in the country?
He's framed the question.
Will authorities be going door to door in this country? Okay. Well, I thought what we heard from Kamala Harris was that they had a very good border situation going on. In fact, she testified to it where they had records of all of the people that were coming across the border, and they were paying attention. They were having hearings and this kind of thing. But now, David Muir, apparently the one thing he doesn't take her word for is any of that. It's that you'll have to go door to door.
And that is what Holmes said is so critical, because the whole crux of Kamala's bullshit on immigration is like, oh, well, we give them the summons to show up in court, and, that's that. So the idea that, well, if that's how the system works, all you do is you summon them to court and then you deport, right? But Muir knows, wait a minute, no. We have to scare people. We have to make it that Donald Trump's on defense. We have to make it look like he has to be held accountable, not the current incumbent who's sitting right in front of me.
Right.
He's like, would you go door to door?
Door to door. Door to door. The old SWAT team right in a suburb near you, Like you don't know it. I mean, so anyway, in the process of explaining to David what it is that he would do, he also talks about how the crime's through the roof, talks about Venezuelan gangs, which we've seen with our own very own eyes, raiding like apartment buildings in Colorado and the like. David Muir feels the need to interject again.
Mm-hmm. Surely he's interjecting with somebody who was murdered by an illegal immigrant that was let out of jail by Kamala Harris.
No, in fact, that is not the case. What he's actually referring to, President Trump, as you know, the FBI, says overall violent crime is coming down in this country.
Once again, the people who are affected by all of these problems are given no voice.
That's what they really want.
The only voice that matters is the one saying that nothing is going wrong.
So he explains that the statistics the FBI is using doesn't include major metropolitan areas, which stopped sending the FBI their violent crime data after the George Floyd riots. That's a fact. Again, did we have that? No. Donald Trump is left to do the fact checking on the moderator.
This
not on his
is
opponent.
so insane. Now Donald Trump has to debate 3 people. He has to moderate the debate. He has to fact check the debate. This guy is juggling 9 different things.
And he's getting frustrated, obviously.
It's like, bro, somebody do your job.
So, I mean, look, you want to know? So they're not quite done. Again, this whole thing started with what she would do different than Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. We've yet to hear an answer on that very question. But one more time, for the 3rd time in this section, thank you, President Trump. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris. That's it. Remember, he has reframed the question to Donald Trump on many occasions with the liability that he perceives. Like, well, how will you deport people? I just want to clarify what's happening in Springfield. Mm-hmm. Why did you try to kill that bill? This is all the immigration segment. This is the administration that's literally sitting in place that, through abject failure, allowed millions, perhaps tens of millions of people into this country because of their horrible, horrible border policy. And it is Donald Trump that has gotten not 1, not 2, but 3 reframings of a question that was originally intended for Vice President Harris about what she would do differently from Joe Biden.
Polls show this is one of Kamala Harris's biggest liabilities, is because Americans realize her border policies, her being border czar, has been an abject failure, and David Muir has taken it upon himself to prosecute Donald Trump on the issue of immigration, not the incumbent sitting in front of him. The insanity of that, of David Muir being like, I know for a fact that immigration hurts Kamala Harris. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to attack Donald Trump on immigration. Think about that.
I mean, it's totally
wild.
Crazy. So in her final thing, she also interjects the attack we knew that was coming, on Donald Trump, who he is, a criminal, all of this other stuff, no respect for law enforcement, all of this kind
Which,
of thing.
again, I think is a bad idea because polling shows that just makes more like voters be like, well, it looks like Trump's getting a bad shake here.
Yeah. So, again, no pushback, Vice President Harris, thank you.
Thank you. He thanks
That's
her.
the end of it. Trump, again, is like, wait, excuse me. And it says he's got to talk about the cases that have been brought against him, that are political cases, right? Again, he's got some polling that would suggest the majority of people agree with him. He talks a little bit about the case in Georgia, what's happening in New York, all this document cases, talks about how Joe Biden did all this stuff and it all kind of went away. And then David Muir asks for Vice President Harris's response to what he's saying on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department. You notice what he did there?
Yep.
So on every other follow-up that we've gotten to date, it is basically like your thoughts. What do you think on immigration? What do you think on this notion?
Yeah.
It qualifies, without saying he's wrong, it qualifies and allows for the permission structure to, again, get the baseball bat out and hammer it to the middle of his forehead.
All these examples that Trump just ran through of like how he was like, and then, we proved that this was BS, and so this got dismissed, and this got dismissed. He's laying out these facts. And David Muir's like, Kamala, I'm going to say that everything he said was wrong. I'm going to call it a notion, like it's all fake. Just do something.
And we're sorry that we didn't get felony worked into one of the questions, so we're going to do it now.
Yeah.
We'll do it live. All right? So go ahead, take out your bat. She does her thing. Thank you, Vice President.
Yeah. Thanks for again.
Thanks. That's it. Like she's hammering away about how he's going to weaponize the Department of Justice and prosecute his political enemies. I mean, she's making extraordinary claims in this.
Yeah.
It's not just like the Justice Department is doing their work like you would expect a sane person to do. Like she's now saying that like, no, we're not weaponizing. He's weaponizing it, and he's actually going to prosecute every Democrat in the country. Thank you. Thank you, Vice President.
He says thanks.
Just imagine that. Thank you. Okay, well, that seems like a non-consequential answer for something that 330 million people should be probably pretty worried about. Anyway, Trump has to get back in, but they have a lot now. As soon as he starts talking about getting in, we have a lot to get to. So they got to usher him.
No.
Usher him back off the stage. And again, oh, go ahead.
Well, I think this is the moment, and if I may be misremembering, but I'm sure it says it right there. I think this is the moment when he says, what they did to me is probably why I got a bullet to the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just brushed that under the rug.
They're like, oh, that is right.
Because
that's why they changed it.
They sprinted away from that so fast.
Because Kamala went to the language of like, he's a danger to the country. He's a threat. He's dangerous, which is the exact kind of language that inspires a wacko to try and kill President Trump.
Which they have done their damnedest to bury.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We are 2 months removed from the attempted assassination of a former president in this country, and you can't find it anywhere.
Mm-mm.
You can't find it anywhere. It's not a part of this discussion at all. He has to interject it, and as soon as he does, David Muir, we got a lot to get to.
We got a lot to get to. Please don't talk about that.
We got a lot to get to.
Folks, don't remember the image of how amazing he looked.
That could
Push
be
it out of your head.
That could be perceived as heroic, and we've talked to the city manager, and we say we're moving on. So again, they get to the question in the base questions. The next question fits the same mode of everything up to this point. They're asking her about flip-flops. They specifically bring up fracking, buyback gun programs, border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. You say that your values haven't changed. Why have so many of your policy positions? Okay. All right. Let's take a listen to what she has to say. Nothing. Absolutely nothing in any of this. She says she's made it very clear in 2020, as we said on the top of the show, that she doesn't ban fracking. No, that's when you said you'd ban.
And this is such an easy gimme for these activist moderators to be like, roll that footage, or just say, actually, the only thing you said in 2020 is you would ban fracking. Do they ask her that? Like, do they bring up the fact that she said straight up in 2020?
Well, we've now had 4 straight Trump responses where they've asked him to follow up on something that he's said. So when she doesn't address changing her mind, but instead insinuates this has all been her position all along. On all of these things that we just discussed, Lindsay Davis comes in. President Trump, your response. Nope, we're going to leave it to the old man to try to work his way out of this one.
Yeah. Again, this is a magic moment because essentially the question has been like, so it turns out, Kamala, you flip-flopped on all of this. Do I have this correct, that everything you said in 2020 you're just making up, or are you just making up that you're against it now? Kamala says, I didn't say any of that shit. And so the moderator's like,
Moving on.
President Trump.
So Trump, again...
Would you like to be the moderator and follow up on that? Or because I don't want to do my job. I'm here to help Kamala.
So Trump is again forced into the position to do the job that was done on him by the moderators. So he has to interject again. And, if you're thinking about this, you're watching it, you're like, man, he's just like kind of hostile here and he's jumping in and you're wondering why. But when you look at the transcript, you understand why. Because on every question that he got, the moderators did Kamala Harris's job. On every question that she gets, they move on. And he's got to do the moderator's job.
That's the crux of this whole thing we're going through.
So he goes through and then starts talking about all this stuff that we've been talking about on the show, the Minneapolis bail fund, the confiscate your guns stuff, the fracking stuff. I mean, he's putting facts on the board here. He's laying it all in, and Lindsay Davis just interrupts. We have a lot of issues to get to.
She's like, stop it.
We're out of time.
Stop with that shit. Don't hold her accountable.
We got a lot of
Knock that
issues.
shit off.
We have a lot of issues, so I'm going to turn to my colleague for 300-word questions. You wouldn't want to hear one more sentence out of something that may pertain to your vote. Instead, we're going to turn to our news anchor to provide 300 words on January 6th.
There we go.
January 6th. You knew it was coming. They couldn't resist, but here we are. So Jan 6. He's talking about this. He's talking about all this stuff. David Muir, which, again, if we look at the pattern of what happened with the last couple of questions to Kamala Harris, they asked Kamala Harris for her response. Did they do that? No, they sure did not. You were watching this unfold on your television. It's a very simple question. As we move forward to another election, is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no? Again, they have asked a very simple question on the issue of immigration, on the issue of foreign policy, on the issue of the economy. She has done none of it. She's never answered the question. But now we got a liability for Trump. So when I talked about at the top of the show, there were 7 liabilities brought up for Trump, 4 for Kamala Harris. All 7, they got this situation. All 7.
That is what's really fascinating.
Any answer he provided, they were going to come back at it and pin his ass down.
Essentially, they let polls guide their approach to moderating, where they were like, what is something that hurts Kamala? We will not follow up on any of this. Anything she says, we're just going to move on. Anything Trump says on a liability, we're going to cross-examine over and over and over, and then we're going to throw it to Kamala to try to bat him.
I mean, so he talks about, so he's trying to actually answer the question. So he's explaining the security issue and talking to Nancy Pelosi, who refused National Guard help. Now that's all a matter of record. Like, we've seen
This
all
is
of
all
that.
factual.
That's
Yes,
all
correct.
fact. He interjects again and says, we're not talking about former Speaker Pelosi.
He's like, don't bring old shit.
Yeah.
It's like,
We're not
please,
talking about
President Trump.
this question.
She's
was
friends
about
with
you.
our boss, too.
Yeah. You
But
think I want Nancy mad at me? She might take my job next.
So after clearing the name of Nancy Pelosi, does he allow Trump to keep going here? But I do want Vice President Harris to respond. She's responding to a question to Donald Trump about whether he would do anything differently than he did on January 6th.
Insane.
What's the response? What's the policy import of a response to this? What is the... All you're doing is, again, grabbing the brick baseball bat, walking it over, and asking her to wail away. There is nothing that she can say that provides substance on this issue. But turns out she's got about 400 words of her own that seem like a great memorized part of your speech.
Yep.
And she hammers away.
Weird that she's teed up uncritically to issue a memorized statement. Just by happenstance. It's serendipitous.
But that's the thing
they didn't know. There was no conversation between Kamala and her best friend who runs ABC News. That didn't happen. They don't do that. The media doesn't talk to Democrats.
Yeah. Donald Brazil doesn't exist. Forget all that.
So, but interestingly, in the context of her response, she does two things. She invokes Charlottesville on the both sides thing, which has been utterly debunked. Utterly debunked. Just factually not true.
Surely David Muir, Lindsay Davis said that was debunked.
They sure didn't. They sure didn't.
Interesting.
They talked about, she had like 3 different things that have been completely debunked in there. And David Muir doesn't do anything. Trump has to again interject and try to clear the debunking.
Yeah.
Right? Which, he didn't do, it wasn't perfect, but he had to do something. Because again, they're bringing up factual inaccuracies. The moderator, which has no problem doing that for every one of the Trump answers, just refuses to do that to Kamala Harris. So he's, again, in the middle of it. They're going. He's like, they're back and forth on this stuff. They're allowing her to just take brick baseball bat out after brick baseball bat. So, all right, can we get back? This is January 6th, 2020, 21. Can we talk, let's get back to the elections stuff. And they're like, yeah, we should get back to the election stuff. Are you acknowledging you lost in 2020?
And the thing is that they changed the subject when Trump is talking about, when he's going after Kamala, when he's talking about the crux of the question of this election, that Kamala Harris, while you've been a part of this administration, while you've been border czar, here's your failures, here's your flip-flops. They said, we have a lot to get to. Yeah. Now let's attack Trump and talk about any of his liabilities we can. They moved the entire frame that what voters care about in this election. Like, no, the hell with that.
In fairness, the outcome of the 2020 election was the largest contributing factor to our terrible economy and our open border.
Oof.
Yeah, right.
That's amazing.
Right. So anyway, now he's got to talk. He's got to talk about whether he believes that he didn't win the 2020 election. They know that's a problem for him. So on we go. He interjects at one point saying judges, Muir, that is, interjects at one point saying judges said there is no widespread fraud. Again, this is coming on the heels of the Jan 6 question. So, they're really in the thick of it here. And at some point, they're like, we're probably going to need to direct something to Kamala Harris. So let's come up with this. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded to Donald Trump saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
That was a wild moment.
Folks, the reason we're doing this, the reason we're going through this line by line is you got to know this shit. And unless you do this for a living, nobody would take the time to do what it is that we're doing. But that is an unfucking thinkable question.
It's insane.
The idea that you have framed 2 questions. One question you framed as your own talking points, asking if you agree with your talking points. And the second is your campaign's lawyer says, this guy's terrible. Do you agree with your campaign lawyer? This is unbelievable.
They're essentially reading a campaign statement that's saying that Donald Trump is going to do horrible things. Do you agree with your campaign that Donald Trump is going to do horrible things? That just happened. That's what just happened.
That's what just happened. So they give, again, she says a bunch of shit in here, all of which could be completely debunked or at least put into context. Did David Muir take the opportunity to have clarification on any of that? No, turn to Trump. What do you think? What do you think? So now, again, he's got to go through this whole thing, and I think he probably could have done it better, although he has got a couple of good things trying to debunk what she has done in the previous segments on saying she's for energy and everything else. But it's a little meander. You can't blame the guy. At this point, he's trying to defend 8 flanks and 3 different parties that are coming at him the whole time. So it becomes a little disorganized.
The current question is, Kamala Harris, your campaign says Trump is bad. Do you agree with that? Trump, are you bad? Kamala Harris's campaign said you're bad. I think that sounds about right. What do you think, Trump? That's what he's dealing with right now.
So finally, they got to get to a real question to Kamala. So they do this is the Israel-Hamas thing, which, on its face, this could be a real liability for these guys. They've not managed this thing well. They got a Democratic base problem. They talk about how she says that Israel has a right to defend itself. But, this is now it seems like you're softening a little bit, and there's still 100 hostages there, and you guys haven't done a damn thing. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it? How would you do it? She says. She's got about 300 words that comes back at us. The crux of it is a quote, "We'll work around the clock." There's nothing. There is no plan in here. Like that. We'll work around the clock.
We're not doing it now, but come January, round the clock.
I mean, it's circular. We'll work around the clock. And that's it. And then she goes to President Trump. How would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more citizens? He does a great job. Also points out the fact that she won't meet with Netanyahu, which she didn't. Said she was at a sorority function, which I thought was hilarious.
Which is completely true.
It was very, very funny. But in the process of that, he also said, this lady hates Israel. She hates Israel. And maybe that's a little tough. But she clearly has been trying to triangulate on this issue. And Lindsay Davis just takes that piece of it and turns to nothing to do with her answer, which work around the clock was the crux of her thing. No follow-up.
There's none like... The question is, okay, so you guys have fucked this whole thing up. What would you do differently if you had the chance? She's like, I'd work hard on it. Cool.
Okay, awesome. President Trump, you're a shittier worker. How do you respond? You know what I mean?
Amazing.
So then she says, he says you hate Israel.
Yeah.
That's it. He says you hate Israel. Okay, so she's got another 4 paragraphs to respond to all of that. She talks about dictators and all of this stuff. It goes back and forth for a little while. And finally, it gets to, they got to switch off of Israel because with such adequate answers, then the question that was dedicated to Kamala Harris, not one piece of which was actually answered other than the work around the clock, to Ukraine, which they perceive as a liability for Trump. And the question is very simple, in the words of David Muir. Do you want Ukraine to win this war? So, obviously, he goes on to explain how this whole thing works in terms of why he is so confident he'd be able to win this war.
Yeah.
Right? Relationships, you're talking about all the fake stuff that the Biden administration is using. He's got some good points in here.
Here's something. Here's an area where I wish President Trump would have landed a kill shot. Because what wasn't said is that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine when she was in charge. He didn't do it when I was in charge.
Yeah.
That's because she is weak and I am strong. Make me the president and the problem goes away.
He did say the war would never have happened.
He did say that. He did say that. I just think there were moments when he could have emphasized that she is weak and I am strong.
Because the thing is that
look at what's happened when she has been in office versus when I I know he did get to that stuff, but
this is where again, dude, you're right on all of that. But he's had to fight this 5-way fucking thing where he's fact-checking his opponent and the moderators and trying to get his message out. If there's a little lost in the weeds, I get it.
That's right.
Because in this question, recall, she got, what would you do differently from the Biden administration on Israel? Mm-hmm. She said she'd work harder. No follow-up. He just answered the question more specifically than she did. Just to clarify your question, do you believe it's in the U.S. interest for Ukraine to win the war? Comes back to the original question. He has not done that on immigration. He's not done that on Israel. He's not done that on the economy.
To her.
All of the things that she has asked for.
Not on fracking, not on gun confiscation.
Not on any of it. All the questions were very simple yes or no's to her. At no point did they interject and ask for a clarification. Not one time. Not one time. And here again, they're back at it, right? So they feel like they got him on the run on that. And then they want Vice President Harris's thoughts on all of that. She said, also as commander-in-chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin? And would it be any different from what you're seeing with President Biden? Again, not framing it as a liability, but boy, it seems like you really fucked this one up too. It's what would you do differently? I'm actually okay with the question, because you would think that they would press her on an answer for it. But again, nothing. Her first answer is, well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. And then she goes on to defend the Biden administration's stuff, basically. Like, there's not a single thing that she would do differently. I mean, she talks about how she was over there and did such a great job organizing all of these countries to support Ukraine, and she's done all these things, which nobody fucking believes. And like, he asked her about Vladimir Putin. She's not touching it.
No.
She's not touching it at all. I mean, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin? She didn't, I mean...
No answer.
There's no answer on it. So what did she come back with? Thank you. We heard both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up. I want her to respond to something you said earlier, and Trump has to interject and talk about, like absolute necessity clarifications of what she just said. And it kind of goes back and forth for a while. And finally, Muir decides against going in the direction that he was going, and then says, basically, have you ever met with Vladimir Putin? So she provides another 400 words without actually answering the question about whether she's ever met with the person.
It's incredible that they ask a question of her and she has never had to answer it.
Do you
the
think
entire night?
Do you think after 400 words about her talking about Zelensky and democracy and the United States and the significance of Americans' role and all of this stuff, that they actually reiterated the question about whether she's ever met Vladimir Putin?
They had to.
Sure didn't. We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate. So, I mean, again, Trump has to jump back in and has to clarify that she doesn't know shit about shit because they didn't push her on that.
Yep. They are not moderating. Again, now Trump has to go in and moderate using his time. It's insane.
They go to he now talks about Afghanistan, asks a good question to Kamala Harris about whether she takes any responsibility. Dude, at no point does she do anything at all to talk about her role in the Afghan disaster at all. This is like, instead, she says that Trump is the person. Trump is the person who started the withdrawal to Afghanistan. Muir interjects to say your response that you began the negotiations.
He's like, no, it's okay, Kamala, you'll fuck it up. I'll take it from
Yeah,
here.
no, I got it. I got it from here, right? Which is like complete. So Trump is now forced to explain in great detail the meeting that he had with the Taliban, the now famous one that Wesley Hunt has talked about on our show, about how he basically showed him a picture of his home to say, if there's a hair that is harmed on an American's head, I know where you live.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a great story. But again, he's a little harried because he's been in the middle of trying to defend all these flanks. So it kind of goes quickly. And they just like blow right through it. Okay, we've talked a little foreign policy. Let's get back to the good stuff. We did elections. We did Jan 6. We did abortion. Well, let's turn to race. Because Trump, 8 weeks ago, had a forum with black journalists that Kamala Harris refused to show up at. Mm-hmm. And in that, they were sort of pushing him about whether she's a black or Indian descent or whatever. They made some comments they probably wishes that he had back, sort of like pontificating on all of that. His answer to it in this frame was great. He was like, I don't care what she is.
Yeah, I thought this was one of his best moments. He was like, whatever she says, I don't care.
I
don't care.
So
and
far, he sat through this entire night laying out issues that matter to the American people about how inflation is up, how she's responsible for the problems at the border, how terrible a job happened in Afghanistan. Every time he's brought up the issues that actually matter in this election, they've been batted away, and now they're going to talk about this, and he's like, bro, I don't care, man. I don't care.
Much like the question about January 6th, defend yourself, Kamala, your thoughts on his defense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The redirect on this, Vice President Harris, your thoughts.
Your thoughts.
Your thoughts on race, on what he thinks of you. I mean, it's just, again, it's not a real question. It's just not, like, that's not a thing that you do during presidential debates. This is the kind of thing that Smug, you would be excellent at in like junior high.
Yeah.
Where you're like, hey, this guy talks shit about you. What
This
do you
is
think
just
about that?
called starting shit. It's not moderating. You're just starting shit. And I was great at it.
You still are excellent. You still are excellent. I mean, look, this thing just goes on back and forth. It's all kind of the same shit. She's not answering a goddamn thing. They finally frame up a healthcare question, and it's basically, Donald Trump, you failed to repeal Obamacare. Like, what do you think about all that? He talks a little bit about how shitty the healthcare system is.
And again, right now, the discussion around healthcare is that healthcare costs keep going up. There's no discussion of how, hey, remember Obamacare? We were told costs would go down. Also, Kamala, you were in the White House this past 4 years. Did you guys do anything to bring costs down? No. The question is, Donald Trump, healthcare is bad because of you. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's it. And so when he answers about how shitty Obamacare is, again, within the framework that Kamala Harris has used now 9 times in this debate, she says, so it's a yes or no. Do you have a plan?
It's amazing.
It's just, look, that's what this is, dude. If you want to make a gotcha shit out of stuff, you can do that any time as a debate moderator. You have to be very careful if you're a debate moderator when you're choosing a gotcha moment to make sure that you got a gotcha moment on the other side, or else you're going to be accused of shit like this. But when you go through the whole thing, it's not one-sided. It's 7-0. There's 5 interjections for fact checks, 0 for Kamala Harris.
It's insane.
There's 7 different times they've broken up into his question to make him clarify the question. When she's asked, what would you do differently than Joe Biden, fails to answer that, and they don't push her on it.
She's like, work harder. They're like, thumbs up. You did okay, I guess.
I mean, and then they fucking end the thing with climate change. And it's just like, holy
wild.
shit.
It's wild.
Like, I can't even believe this was the worst debate moderation I've ever seen. I would take a pitch from like Al Jazeera and CCP pitched together to host a Republican debate before I would ever consider ABC News again.
It's incredible.
That was the most horrific thing that I mean, I hope this was valuable to you. I know it was for us when we went through this, because I remembered it and I felt worse about it last night because I just didn't feel good about it. And I didn't think that Trump was on his A game, and I knew the questions and stuff were a little bit leading. I knew it was imbalanced. But after I've gone through this big fucking transcript, this thing was dialed.
Yeah,
This thing was great.
From the start. There was no shot from the start. What he had walked into was not a debate. This was an ambush. These weren't moderators. They were essentially campaign aides. The entire time. Kamala not once gave a substantive answer to a single thing, was not held accountable for her because, again, they know her weaknesses. She is tied to an unpopular administration. She's responsible, as the borders are, for all of the chaos that's been happening that voters care about. So they took it upon themselves to make sure that when she answers something stupid like, I will work harder, they just move on. This was a setup.
A setup from the beginning. So listen, we wanted to give you this special thing because we thought we had something that was actually really good. You don't get anywhere else. Kind of have to do this for a living in order to see the context, and providing that for you is something that's important for us here on Ruthless. We will have a regular show tomorrow. You're going to see this tonight. I hope you consume this because it's important. We'll have a regular show tomorrow back at you. We've got a doozy for you. We have both Steve Daines and Richard Hudson. So the chairmen of the 2 major committees, NRCC, NRSC, in charge of electing House and Senate Republicans. Super important. Only us will have this stuff for you. It's a great show that we do every 2 years. We got that for you tomorrow. In the meantime, I think we did it.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode. Gentlemen, thank you so much to the minions. We see that a lot of you folks have been sharing our video, liking, subscribing, so let your friends know. And if you have not yet, go to YouTube and hit subscribe. So until next time, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Thursday. Stay ruthless.